K. Parker, Secretary General, Fiki, our Dean, NIER, Professor Manish Kumar Thakur, all the delegates from different parts of the world, support staff, conference organizing team, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning and warm welcome to all of you. It gives me immense pleasure to announce that we have finally arrived at the day, at the moment for which we have been meticulously planning for last several months. To begin the event, I invite our beloved director, Professor Sarkar, to come to the dais and light the lamp. I also invite our chief guest of the day, Mr. K. Parker, to please come to the dais and light the lamp. I invite the Dean NIR to please come to the stage. Professor Rajiv Kumar, request the director to hand over the bouquet. Request the Dean NIR to give a bouquet to our director. Request Professor Rajiv Kumar to give a bouquet to our Dean NIR. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Our civilizational identity, and that is the most primordial identity. It is an identity that molds the character of the individuals, organizations, nation, and society at large. The Management Center for Human Values aspires to establish the root of modern Indian management in the ancient roots of its civilization. We have come together not only to gain knowledge and insights, but also to galvanize our collective resolve to create a more human and value-driven approach to management by taking clues from our cultural values. This two-day conference is specially designed to look back to our roots and reflect how the oldest surviving civilization flourished with its emphasis on sustainable living. The best example of such practices are found in concepts like aparigrama, which means retain whatever necessary and return the rest back to nature. Less wasteful and more sustainable attitude embedded in the philosophy of Indian ways of living that aims to attain Purusartha, or the meaning of human existence, answer all existential questions. So, I hope we will have 2 days of enriching sessions. Now I invite our Dean NIER for the inaugural address.
So, once again, on behalf of IIM Capital, on behalf of MCHV, and on my own behalf, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you. Professor Nishigandha Bhunia, who is the coordinator of MCHV, she has already given you the philosophical underpinnings of this center, the ideas which went into the making of this center. And as someone working in IIM Capital, I can proudly share with you that this institution, this MCHV, is something unique to IIM Capital. And I hope I am not mistaken. No other IIM has, as of now, no other IIM has something like MCHV to boast of, to take pride in. And that's why I think all of us collectively should again pay our tribute to the late Professor S.K. Chakravarti, who had the far-sightedness and the vision to think of this institution within an institution way back in 1992, 95. So they have been around for quite some time. Also, I'm so happy that one of our illustrious alumnus, Mr. Shailesh Pathak, is here amidst us, and he has been very kind to us. I can't reveal, but a few months back he helped us, despite his hectic schedule, in participating in one of the long tourism program, and he was partial towards me, so I want to thank him. And I was so happy when Nishi asked me to suggest someone. I suggested his name, and but I had this worry that whether he would be able to make it. But even then I said, no harm in taking the risk. And when I saw it this morning, I felt so happy. And so please do keep coming and coming to your alma mater, and that gives us a sense of connect. Anyway, just 2-3 sentences about the theme of the conference. I am no expert like Nishi on the theme. But as I was looking at the program schedule, that is something called sustainability and ancient Indian perspective. So I was thinking that if you unpack the word sustainability, ultimately, in its essence, it's about men, and when I say men, I include women. It's about man-nature relationship. If you invoke Karl Marx and if you think that production is the first historical act, so how do you produce? Any act of production needs engagement with nature, and any engagement with nature, in order to fulfill your needs, wants, whatever you call it, that will bring in the ethics of consumption, the ethics of needs. And that's why when we look at this term sustainability, ultimately boils down to the ethical core of what would be the limit of our wants, what should be the boundaries of our needs, and how much can or should we extract from nature. And now these days we know, I think for quite some time now, after that limits to those report that these planetary resources have their own limits. We can't go on exploiting the resources. And also there is a question of intergenerational justice. Should we extract everything for us, for this generation, without bothering about, without thinking of the people who are yet to make their presence felt on this planetary earth? So these are some of the things that I'm sure over the next 2 days, you all are experts, all the participants will debate and discuss. And the one last thing, there is this term called Indian, and there is this term called ancient. So I was thinking that, see, when we think in these terms as academics, as people who take pride in critical engagement with ideas, we should not take any term for granted. This Indianness itself needs to be unpacked continually and recalibrated for the needs of the time. And anything that is there in the past need not be always, simply inherited without any mediation. So the idea is that any academic engagement means that we have to keep introducing these very terms. And that is the purpose of a gathering like this. What is India? What it meant to be Indian some 1,000 years back, does it mean the same thing now? What are the different constituents of this Indianness? These are some of the things that came to my mind, and I think Nishi would agree with me my last thing, that the purpose of this center, and I think it's part of our journal, and that's why that gives me an opportunity to talk about the journal that the center brings about. We will have copies of the journal, and it's quite this journal with all the right type of indexing, journal of human values. I happened to work for this journal for 3 years before her. So, and there I think, if you look at the motto of the journal, it's written there, and I'm just reiterating that Indianness or any engagement with the past, our own past, howsoever glorious, howsoever beautiful, needs to be, is simply not a compendium of everything that is there. It's not uncritical, I call it mining of wisdom and resource. It means critical retrieval of something which serves our present purpose which gives us a sense that how as human beings we can live a life with dignity and with modern sense of justice. So in the past also we have to keep looking for these keywords of human dignity, justice, and to the extent the past helps us achieving those values, we must engage with the past. I am not for one who thinks that anything that comes from the other side of the globe is simply embraced, and anything that is ours really has to be negated and thrown in the Arabian Sea. No, not like that. So brutality is that we can, I'm sure with all these bright minds, you all will have enough time to engage with some of the issues, and I wish you a very happy and enriching engagement over the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Thakur. That was encouraging. Now I invite our keynote speaker of the day, Mr. Salis Thakur, to the dais and deliver the keynote address.
Thank you. It's just easier to be at the same level as the learned schools. Our respected director, IIM Calcutta, Dr. Ji, Dean and I here, Manishi, who actually is carrying on the tradition of our beloved, what's his name? So, many years ago, in 1984, I was student here for 2 years, 1984 to 1986. And one of the best courses that I had gathered was something called Management in Indian Ethos. Right? And all of us typically used to absorb management theories from either the West or from Japan. So it was Max Weber and Henry Fayol and McLaren and so on and so forth. And then you had, at that time, Japan was a role model, so quality circles, just in time, Kaizen. There was very little input from Indian schools of thought. So it was almost as if we had disconnected management education in India completely from the culture and milieu that we were growing up in. Which is slightly surprising, which is why I'm very proud to hear that IIM Calcutta is the only IIM that has something like the MCHV. I'll talk more about this course this time. But, almost all of us have our parents as teachers. And I go back to 2015-16, when my mother gave me a new lesson. I was no longer young by then. 2016, I was pretty old, I'm even older now. And we were standing on the balcony, and my mother and I were looking early morning. And how many people are okay with Hindi in this audience? Yeah? Almost all? Alright. I'll translate in case someone needs. So I said, Maa, wo suraj ho raha hai. The sun is rising. She said, nahi beta, wo suraj nahi, wo suraj Bhagwan hai. सूर्य भगवान नहीं होंगे तो हम नहीं होंगे. What is the lesson? She says, पेड़ पौधे पत्ते नदी झरने ये नहीं होंगे तो हम नहीं. And in many ways, that was 7-8 years ago, my interaction with our own ancient traditions and philosophies. So let me come back to Professor S.A. Chakravarti's course. What are the things we learned and can still remember after so many years? We learned about the concept of Shreya and prayer. There's a very enlightened audience. I was going through the abstract of papers over here, and I am confident of only one thing, that I am the least knowledgeable on this topic in this room. All of you know much more about this than me. So the concept of Shreya and prayer, as we all know, is that something which is short-term gain and long-term pain versus something which is short-term pain but long-term gain in very simple terms. And I don't know whether the tradition still continues in our calendar of, anyone had a birthday. Suppose Manish had a birthday tomorrow. So tonight at 12 midnight, we would all go to his room and give him moms. And he would have to feed us all mishti, mithai. Yeah? And when I was younger, of course, I could eat much more mithai. But you eat 10 rasgullas, 20 rasgullas at one time, it is very, very nice. But it is long-term pain. Short-term, you feel very happy, but long-term, you will obviously develop some complication. Whereas, if you do physical exercise, it is short-term pain, but long-term gain. So, Shreya versus Priya. The other concept we learned was Trigunatita. So, everyone has the Sattva Gun, Raja Gun, Tamasic Gun. And it is the balance of these guns that define our personality. So if you are more sattvic versus if you are more tamasic, it will define your approach towards the world around you. And these concepts were not taught to us in any other course. So, I know 38, 39 years later, I still remember. And this led me to understand that the world that exists around us, actually it is basically between these two ears. It is the way we perceive the world through our sattvic gunas, or tamasic gunas, or rajasic gunas that define our relationship with the world. But let me just come from 1984 to 2023. Right? First time I walked through the gates, the gate was slightly different. The director IIMC joined here in 1997. I'm sure at that time also the gate was slightly different. So I was trying to think of what were the differences between 1984 and 2023. In 1984 we came by train. In 2023 we probably come by air. In 1984, while we were traveling on a train, we used to get down to the railway station platform and take water from the taps on the railway platform. Today, there is no question of carrying a sugahi or a kada. You take a bisleri or something, water. 1986, most of us did not have air conditioning. We used to have traditional methods, cuss and others, and water being sprinkled. Today, we graduated not only to air coolers but air conditioners. 1984, I used to write a letter to my parents. Today, we make a WhatsApp group. Yeah. 1984, we used to have individual cigarettes or things that we used to keep ourselves to keep warm. Today we heat using our air conditioning. And in fact, Western civilizations heat the entire home. 1984, I used to drink a lot of alcohol. Today I drink much less alcohol. Yeah. But 1984, India was a very poor country. 2023 is no longer as poor. Even today it is poor. It is no longer poor. 1984, if you went out in Kolkata, at that time Calcutta, you used to see abject poverty in many cities in India. Particularly Eastern India, you used to see abject poverty. 2023, you do not see abject poverty. But what has not changed in these 37, 38, 39 years? Our mothers used to conserve everything. All of you have, how many people here were born before 1984, please raise your hands. Okay, not very many. So most people are after 1984, which is very good. All of you younger people are smarter than me. Yeah? Our mothers used to conserve everything. And I'm sure that your mothers also conserve everything. Everything is reused. Everything is recycled in our homes. Yeah? One can argue that in 1984, because India was largely poor, it was a function of frugality. Sabko bacha ke chalo, pata nahi kab kaam aa jaye. But all of us know that the domestic things that we use, the powder box or the plastic sheets, everything is stored and recycled. Is it still the same in 2023? The answer is actually yes, to a large extent. So is it because India was a poor country that we used to recycle and reuse a lot of things? No, because even today, most Indian households, which are better off, still reuse and recycle. Yes or no? Where is this coming from? It is not a function of per capita income. It is a function of the mindset that we have. It is a function of the way we relate to the world around us. And I'm going to be now slightly provocative. And I want to say that this is different from, let's say, Western faiths. We in India would probably say that humans are part of nature. But some Western faiths believe that humans are God's gift to the world. We believe that we should worship everything around us. Western faiths think that nature is a resource to be used and exploited. How many people have seen the movie Avatar? That's the theme, right? So you have a traditional faith and you have the new people who could care less about sustainability and resource use, whereas the traditional societies have coexisted with nature and Mother Earth. And Mother Earth is a term that we in India use. I have never heard any American say that we have Mother Earth in the US. What is this relationship that we have, which helps the thought of sustainability? So what did I say? I said Shreya versus Preya. I said the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. And I said we say Mother Earth because we seriously believe that everything around us is to be respected. We are not, in this earth to just cut out everything and slash our way through. And that's why we are not doing it. But there is a counterpoint. The counterpoint is that India is definitely the oldest continuously existing civilization in the world. I think there is no question about that. When you look at excavations in the Harappan Indus Valley civilization, many of those practices and rituals continue till today. But there were things in our ancient Indian world that actually talked about how nature was destroyed. Can anyone give me an example? Can anyone give me an example? So when we talk about ancient Indian thought, where are we deriving this ancient Indian thought from? Which are the sources? We talk about the Shrutis and the Smritis, but if you talk about documented books, which are these books that we derive our thought from? Vedas, number one. Upanishads, number two. Sorry? Srimad Bhagavad Gita, which is part of a much bigger epic called the Mahabharata. Artha Shastra, absolutely. Any others? We have a beautiful oral tradition, which actually is Dadi Maa Ki Kahaniyan kind of thing. Yes, absolutely. Folklore, Saubhagya, in fact, and of course the Ramayana and the Purans. Largely, the Shrutis and the Smritis. So the specific incident I am referring to is part of Mahabharata. Any guesses? Mahabharata is this amazing epic which sees the noblest behavior of man, which includes human IPC section 8, and the worst behavior of humankind. So what is that particular episode in the Mahabharata, which I for one could not understand why an entire forest was consumed with the condition that every living thing in that forest will die. And only 4 or 5 living creatures will escape from the forest. And if you read about this episode, the Mahabharata describes it as every single animal and bird in that forest, their fat contributed to the flames rising even higher. And the fire raged for 15 days. And who are the people making sure that the fire is not put out by the rains? How many people can tell me the story? So the story goes that there was this place called Khandam 1. Please look it up. It's a fascinating story. Khandam 1. And Krishna and Arjuna were approached by Agni. And Agni said that this Khandam 1 has Takshak Nagraj. And because Takshak Nag has the blessings of Lord Indra, every time I try to consume Khandam 1 with my flames, Indra sends his clouds and the rain comes and extinguishes the fire. Fascinating story. And he says, I want this mood from Krishna and Arjuna, that you make sure that when I go and consume this entire forest and set fire to every living thing, including the trees and the animals and the birds, you will make sure that nothing gets out alive. And you will make sure that when Indra comes with his clouds, the rains come, put out the flames. How many people have heard of this story? One. Anyone else? Two? Yeah? You want to share your interpretation of this story? Alright. So, and actually what happened was, every living thing that came out was killed by the arrows of fire. And then Indra came, and he rained down his clouds. So Indra rain was stopped by the flame of arrows of Arjuna and Krishna. So there are episodes like this also. And I would be very happy if during the rich deliberations of today and tomorrow, and the papers that are being presented somewhere, you could also examine why in this kind of an equation that we have with nature, why would Khandam be one? And why would those poor creatures, those animals and those birds who are in Khandam 1, why would they be killed by, of all people, Krishna and Arjuna? So to come back to ancient Indian thought, there is a difference, let's say, between the Vedas, which are considered to be Buddhist, but the most specific difference is between the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. So who would say, who would have the answer to which came first, the Ramayana or the Mahabharata? Which came first, the Ramayana or the Mahabharata? Ramayana, right? Right answer. Now the question is, within the Mahabharata, there are two specific evidences on why the Ramayana was predating the Mahabharata. Can anyone give me the answer? Harmanji? Absolutely. So the story goes that I'll come to the story later. What is the second evidence? So actually, Ramayana deals with a geography which is rather limited as you know, developed kingdoms. But most of India is jungle. Whereas Mahabharata, most of India is described in great detail, in geographical detail. Right? Of course, the other story is that Bhim is this very proud warrior who thinks that nobody is as powerful as him. And the small monkey says, please lift my tail. Everyone knows the story? You also know the story? Fascinating. So, the way of the Ramayana is actually the way of the righteous. Ram will do the right thing even at the cost of completely repudiating his own relationships. And I would say in many ways, Mahabharata is all about how the world is rather than how the world should. Ramayana is about how the world should. Mahabharata is about how the world is. And this Professor S. A. Chakravarti called the positive and the normative. So the normative is what should be. The positive is what is. To come back to our theme, Indian sustainability is actually the classic dilemma between what should be and what is. Right? And if you cast your eyes on history, I'll share a couple of my tweets with Professor here, which talks about the past and the future. In the past is, as Angus Madison has shown us, between 180 or 080 and 1780, India pretty much contributed to 25 to 35% of world GDP. How many people knew this? Yeah, not many, not many. I'll send you that, we play that animation. But in 1700, we lost our way. And by 1900, actually our contribution to world GDP came down to less than 5%. And at the same time, the contribution of UK, England, to the world GDP went up to some 20, 25, 30%. It was a classic inversion of roles. Now to talk about the future. Did you know that in 1947, India was one of the top 10 economies in the world? Yes or no? How many people know this? There are not many. In 1947, when we became independent, India was one of the largest 10 largest economies in the world. We fell out from the top 10 in 1966-67. Of course, there was a devaluation, but there was also a very slow rate of growth. When did we come back to the top 10 economies in the world? We came back in 2009. 2009, we became one of the largest 10 economies in the world once again. And today we are the 5th largest economy in the world. In less than 7 years, we will become one of the top 3 economies of the world. Right? And just to use a number, I won't use too many numbers here, but just to use a number, Morgan Stanley has just come out with this report on India. And they say that the GDP of India as a whole last year was around $3174 billion. $3174 billion. That's $3.2 trillion, I'm sorry. So it's $3.2 trillion. They say from 3174 by 2030, India's GDP is going to be close to $7917 billion. That's $7.9 trillion. I'm not going to use any other number to do this stuff. So can you imagine from 3.2 trillion to 7.9, nearly 8 trillion in less than 7 years. So the past, we have a rich ancient past, but what about the future? The future is we are, all of us are going to see an India growing from $3.2 trillion to nearly $8 trillion. That's a 245% increase in 7 years. All of us are going to see never before kind of change in India. Will our ancient traditions help us in navigating this very difficult question? And here is my sense of concern. My sense of concern is that a lot of Indians for whom English is their first language are actually getting disconnected from our ancient traditions. And how can this August gathering and this set of practitioners as well as academics help reconnect those who are getting disconnected from our ancient Indian traditions and who are trying to become more Americans than anything else? Whether we like it or not, all of us in this room have some relatives of the other who are staying in the US. Yes or no? And because of that, we are importing first world concepts into an Indian milieu. So for instance, just to give you an example, how many seasons are there in India? So what are the seasons that we commonly talk about? So we talk about 4 seasons, no? All of us know 4 seasons. What are the 4 seasons, please tell me? Yes, there are no wrong answers. Huh? Summer, summer. So actually this is exactly the point. There are not 4 seasons in India, there are 6 seasons in India. The Western world knows summer, autumn, winter, spring. In India, there are 6 seasons. And that's what happened in an American classroom, or actually in a classroom in Kolkata. The teacher said, what happened to the rains? So the 6 seasons in India are Basant Ritu, spring, then Grishma, which is summer, then Varsha, that is monsoon, Sharad, that is autumn, Hemant, which is pre-winter, right? And of course Shishir, that is winter. So when you go back to your homes, ask people how many seasons we have, 4 or 6. And unfortunately, we are importing first world concepts and trying to force it into Indian realities. Classic example, when is World Environment Day? 5th June. June is the worst possible month for most of India to celebrate anything related to our environment because all of us are getting completely fried. But we celebrate 5th June as World Environment Day. Why? Because some rich Europeans and some rich Americans who largely live in very cold areas have the best possible weather in June. Yeah? And we celebrate our classic weather at Basant Panchami. Right? So why don't we have Basant Panchami as our Indian environment? A lot of English-only speaking Indians, or the first language of English-speaking Indians, have gotten disconnected from India, that is Bharat. The Constitution talks about India, that is Bharat. And are completely connected with New York and London. So a lot of what is the narrative in New York and London for environment and sustainability gets replicated in India. Completely absurd. We have a per capita income of $2,000. An average American has a per capita income of nearly $60,000. What is the comparison between the way when I air condition my house, I don't put the entire house in air conditioning. Only the room that I'm sleeping in, I air condition. In the winter, only the room that I'm sleeping in will have the heater. And these rich Americans and Europeans will heat the entire home. So anytime you want a reality check on carbon emissions, just look at the carbon emissions map of the world. Most carbon emissions happen because of rich Americans and rich Europeans heating their homes and consuming so much energy. And if the average Indian was even to reach that level of American consumption, I started to imagine climate change would happen in how many months rather than years. To talk about climate transition, there was a famous African leader who talked about how the rich world and the not so rich world are like this fat person who has had a 10-course meal, ending in a nice dessert. And then he calls the other person and says, come, we have coffee together. And then the restaurant bill comes. And he says, let us split this bill equally. So much of the European and American world has contributed to most of the carbon emissions of the world. And now they want to split the bill equally. And the entire problem about climate transition is climate finance, and the entire problem about climate finance is that in every deliberation, it is said that rich countries should finance the transition of poorer countries. But the money does not come. And as we know, there is this famous saying that in theory, there is no difference between theory and practice, full stop. In practice, there is full stop. We live and see it every day. There is a lot of difference between theory and practice. All of you, as professionals and academics, know the difference between theory and practice. So if you come back to the Vedas and the Puranas, the Upanishads, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Rajasthan, Radhimati, and folklore, I have not seen any other culture where a crow is giving a completely authoritative address to an eagle. Bob Bushelli is giving this complete treatise to Garuda. I have seen no other culture, but then again, most pagan cultures worship nature. And there were these new cultures that said that man is the most supreme being and we will tame everything around us. So our culture never talked about taming everything around us. Even in Amrit Manthan, I'm sure most people have heard of Amrit Manthan. How many people have Amrit Manthan? Even in Amrit Manthan. So Amrit Manthan was this journey of the oceans. I'm talking to the youngest and smartest person in the room. So what happened was, the Suras and the Asuras, and remember, in Indian tradition, the Asuras are not evil. They're just different. Right? India is a land of diversity. I often say that the top 7 cities of India speak 7 different languages. So Kolkata, Bengali, Delhi, Hindi, Bombay, Marathi, Chennai, Tamil, Hyderabad, Telugu, Bangalore, Kannada, Ahmedabad, Gujarati. So the Suras and the Asuras get together to churn the ocean. And what do they use as a rope? The king of Nagas, the king of snakes, Vasuki. And what are the things that come up? Anyone remembers how many things that came out of Amrit Manthan? Okay, so I have the exact number, I won't go into that. But one of the things that comes up is the Parijat tree. And the Parijat tree is so fascinating that the Lord of the gods, Lord Indra, takes the Parijat tree and puts it in the loop, in heaven. And we also have somebody called a Narad Muni. The Narad Muni is this guru who goes around and makes sure that he creates mischief every day. Sounds like some politicians of today. So Narad Muni. So Narad Muni goes and talks to Krishna's wife, in fact. And he says, this is the Parijat leaf, it's such a beautiful tree. And it is in Indra's kingdom. It should be in your kingdom. It should be with Krishna. He tells both the wives of Krishna. And then Satyabhama goes to Krishna and says, no, I must have the Parijat tree, and so on and so forth. And Krishna, remember, is the incarnation of Vishnu. And they resolve that they will capture the Parijat tree. They will attack Indra, and capture the Parijat tree and bring it back. Narada, being Narada, goes to Indra and says, Samagya, it is highly probable that Krishna and his army will come and try to capture the Parijat tree. Anyone remembers this story? No? Okay. So what happens thereafter is that Satyabhama, who was a famous warrior, she was a famous warrior. And again, in not many cultures celebrate women as famous warriors, or women as learned sages and so on, yoginis, rishivas. So Krishna and Satyabhama go on the Garuda, the Vahan of Krishna, and take the Parijat tree. And just as they are coming out of Indra, Indra comes on his Airavat, and this is lightning bolt Vaishnav. And there's a fierce battle between Krishna and Satyabhama on one side, and Indra to protect the Parijat tree. I have seen no other culture which has this kind of diversity, that Vishnu's incarnation and Indra are fighting, and Satyabhama is helping Vishnu. And of course, they take the Parijat tree, and the moral of the story is that there were two wives of Krishna. One was more proud, the other was more decent. And Krishna plants the Parijat tree in Satyabhama's area, where the fruits and the flowers and the leaves of the Parijat tree fall on the other side in Rukmini's area. Now let me go to a different culture. I don't know how many people have read about Isaac Asimov. Isaac Asimov? So Isaac Asimov is a science fiction writer who's actually written some amazing books and stories. One of them is called Nightfall. And Nightfall, I sincerely recommend that all of you read it. Sorry. I sincerely recommend all of you read it. Nightfall is about this culture and civilization where scientifically, there are 3 suns in that culture. S-U-N, sun. So there are 3 suns in that culture, and there is never any night in that culture. Okay? But astronomical predictions and scientific calculations say that on such and such year, in such and such day, all the 3 suns will set at the same time. Okay? And something unprecedented will happen, which is the absence of light, which is the darkness. And various people are saying this is nonsense, this will never happen. Various people are saying that the science is right, it will happen. And then there is this group of people who are supposed to be mystics and closer to nature. And they have this tradition that when this sun will go down, the earth, the skies will be full of little points of light, called stars. Okay? And those people, the mystics, actually have this tradition dating back from ages, saying every time there is a cycle, everything in the world will be burned, but we have to hide ourselves because it's only going to be around 12 hours and then we can come back and remake the world. Okay? And the final scene in that story, Nightfall, is that the suns go down, the stars come out. Everybody who's not part of the mystics have hidden themselves away. Everybody burns everything around them to get light. And the entire civilization burns down in less than 3 hours. And that is the element of connection that I wanted to mention. Because all of you know Hanumanji and Ramji. When Ram had to leave this earth, The deal was that as long as Hanuman is there in Ayodhya, the god Yam cannot come to Ayodhya. I like some water if possible. If you can have, yeah, thanks. So as long as Hanumanji is in Ayodhya, the god of death Yama cannot come to Ayodhya. So what Ram does is he takes off his ring and he drops it in a hole in the ground. And of course, God is supposed to go and get the ring. So Hanuman keeps going and going and going. And finally he emerges into Patal. This story I'm sure some of you know. So he emerges in Patal Road. And he comes across the king of Patal Road. It is time for Ram to leave the world. And Hanuman says, what do you mean? What are you saying? So, the king of Patal says that in every yuga, one monkey comes in to find you. And he shows Hanuman a bunch of things which are stored. So this is classic circular economy. There is no day of judgment here. And that is why I say that ancient Indian thought is the most close to the concepts of sustainability and circularity. And remember, this is not only true for India. If you go to Japan, if you go to Korea, this element of circularity will be there. Coming to today's concept, anyone who has spent any time in tribal areas in India, Bastar, Sarguja, I have had the fortune to be in Santhal Pargana. Yeah? So you know that the tribals even today will be very, very close to nature. And no tribal will ever consume what sheer wheat needs. And it's a really, everything in this room, this bottle, glass, this clothing, this furniture, that light, everything ultimately is derived from Mother Earth. Right? And this aspect of calling Mother Earth or Mother is true for Eastern cultures also. So since we are in a management school, let me just talk about some corporate practices. And incidentally, I have spent 19 years in the private sector. My last job in the private corporate sector was, I was CEO of a company called Larsen & Toubro Infrastructure Projects, L&T Group, for 5 years. Now I was in Chennai. Anyone who's coming here? No? Alright. I learned how to read and write coming here. And my current job is Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry. I have also spent 17 years in the IIMC, Indian Administrative Service. But today, since you're in a business school, what does the Chief Sustainability Officer of one of India's largest conglomerates have to say? I spoke to Anirban. He's this Chief Sustainability Officer of the Mahindra & Mahindra Group. And he says, we had lost our way by blindly thinking Western designs. Now, our design, especially for construction, is more passive, which means you incorporate natural light, you incorporate natural ventilation. But sadly, because in some places like Gurgaon, we see a lot of glass being used in buildings. And this is a complete copy of what is happening in New York and Chicago. And in India, possibly any glass facade facing the south is the worst possible thing we do for design. So Anirban tells me that we are coming back to the old Indian ways of thoughts. M.K. Ranjit Singh, anyone has heard of Project Tiger, Preserving Tigers? M.K. Ranjit Singh was this classic, legend in Project Tiger, and I was talking last week in Delhi. And anyone who's met a tiger, especially a tiger who's ferocious, knows how scary that animal is, what we worship. Right? He says that Indians are a naturally tolerant people. So even if the tiger comes and takes your cattle, a lot of Indians will say, the tiger also needs to survive, the tiger also needs to live. So this was my contribution to the tiger. Most other cultures would actually make sure that they kill the tiger and no other damage. So let me conclude. I think this has been a very unstructured conversation. But let me conclude by repeating somebody. The World Economic Forum says that India is one of the least wasteful economies, and it has great lessons for climate change mitigation and environmental sustainability. Sustainability has always been a core component of Indian culture, and our philosophies and values have underscored a sustainable way of life. And of course, you talked about the Aparigraha concept. Indian consumers are most conscious about their environmental footprint and are making the most sustainable choices. So much so that when all of you are growing up, if you wasted any food on your plate, your parents gave you a big scolding. I hope you do that never. So there was I wanted to actually quote this. In the 65th session of the United Nations General Assembly in 2010, in fact in August 2010, just 13 years ago, there was a session devoted to sustainable development, harmony with nature. And on the Indian tradition, the approach paper noted that the Vedic philosophy of India has always emphasized the human connection with nature. Vedism is a way of life based on scriptures, which were written by sages who lived in the forest. The Mahabharata, Ramayana, Vedas, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Puranas, and Smriti contain some of the earliest messages on ecological balance and the need for people's ethical treatment of nature. They emphasize harmony with nature and recognize that all natural elements hold within. These are the United Nations. My final point is, we are in the year of G20, and what are the themes of G20? They are particularly Indian. Our philosophy, our thought is reflected. Green development, three principles. Green development, climate finance, and lifestyle for environment, LIFE. Accelerated, resilient, inclusive growth, and increased progress on sustainable development goals, which of course are about per capita income and environment. And someone said, you know that India is 1/6 of the global community. Our development needs are enormous. People in India have waited too long to access modern amenities and means of development. We have committed to complete this task sooner than anticipated. However, we have also said that we will do all this in a cleaner and cleaner way. And I'm very happy, ladies and gentlemen, to be present in this two-day conference, which will talk about how we will do this in a cleaner and cleaner way. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So this is a beautiful pretext to the conference. This shows your knowledge in the field. Now I request our director to hand over the memento as a token of our appreciation to our chiefs. Memento and the conference speech.
after this beautiful talk, I have nothing to say. All I will say, you are aware, IIM Calcutta is the country's first IIM, and we all believe, education is the protection for human being only, so that we exist in a better and better way. And that can be done only if our traditional learning is complemented with values, human values. So with this great idea, this Management Center of Human Values was created at IIM Calcutta, and we try to make our modest effort to various programs, lectures, webinars, conferences like this to inculcate human values so that we can make a better world for more. I have reasons to believe that we are all working in this field, and in this 2 days program, we will feel inspired to make it a better world tomorrow. Thank you very much. And anyone who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, she has my email, sg@figure. Thank you.
Yeah, so we break for tea, and then we move towards MPC. We have a minibus parked outside, so we go outside. So we break for tea. So hopefully you had very enriching and encouraging and enthusiastic sessions. Thank you very much. So we have amongst us Mr. Sankar Venkateshwaran. Incidentally, he is also our alumni. Sankar is currently the co-founder and managing partner sustainability integration at EQ Investment Advisors that focuses on ESG stewardship, sustainability products trading, climate lending, and ESG investing. So he has worked both for NGO, corporate, and government. Some of which his experiences include he worked for the Tata Group as director with Global Think Tank Sustainability, also consulting firms like PwC. He has advised the Ministry of Corporate Affairs on matters such as CSR and responsible business conduct. He was very closely involved in drafting the national guidelines for responsible business conduct, released by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs in March 2019, and its companion Business Responsibility and Sustainability Report, which was mandated for the top 1,000 listed companies in India by SEBI in May 2021. So that is actually today's topic, where we will be talking about national guidelines for responsible business conduct. And I welcome, I request Professor Oja, Professor Abhay Kumar Oja from IIM Bangalore, to hand over the bouquet to welcome our guest. So one thing I forgot, and I think I should not have, Sankar is a distinguished alumnus of IIM Calcutta. He has got the prize, I think, a year back or so. Welcome, so waiting to hear.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Nishiyanda. It's always good to come back to campus. I actually happened to be here because I was teaching a course, and in the process, she saw me and said, invited to share some experiences. So that's what brings me here. It's somewhat unprepared. So I thought the best thing is to speak about some things that I've done, so I don't have to prepare, just about speaking to something that I've already done. And so that's why I thought I would just share some experiences on the national guidelines for responsible business conduct. But I must say that coming to this particular auditorium brings me a lot of good memories. I have taught in this auditorium before, I think more than a decade and a half ago. So at that time we were not allowed to wear slippers, they put a footwear outside and then walk in, so it was all, so it's very different now and very interesting. Of course, Professor Chakravarti was a professor of finance when I was here, and I did attend one of his courses, so lots of nostalgic memories of here. So let me start and let me take you through the experience of the national guidelines. And just to reflect on some of the kinds of things that we were looking at and thinking about when we were drafting these. So, just in terms of context, let me start by saying what the National Guidelines for Responsible Business Conduct are. So this is a document that was released by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs that tries to outline expectations of what companies must conduct themselves to be considered to be working on sustainability or in a responsible way. Because I think the easy part is to say be responsible, the hard part is say what does that mean, how do we do it. So the national guidelines were trying to understand, we're trying to answer that particular question. The context was, and although the guidelines were released in 2019, it's part of a process that started in 2009. And in 2011, there was the first version of this, which is called the National Voluntary Guidelines. And then this was then worked on in an updated form in 2019. Just to give you a context, that at that time there were very few frameworks that defined what sustainable behavior meant. There was, in the early part of the millennium, there was the UN Global Compact, which you may have heard of, which was the first attempt at 10 principles, and the first attempt to sort of define what it means to conduct yourself in a responsible, in a sustainable way. There are 10 principles, and then associated with that was a reporting framework. So, and that was built on the Millennium Development Goals that the UN had agreed at the turn of the millennium. A little later, there was something called the ISO 26000, which was again standard, an ISO standard, which tried to again define what this meant to a company. But other than that, there was very little that companies could hang on to in terms of saying, okay, am I on this path? Am I being responsible? The other context that is important to understand was that while the frameworks, these two were around and for a while, the number of frameworks that were looking at reporting or disclosures by companies was growing in a very rapid rate. So early you had something called the Global Reporting Initiative, turn of the millennium, then you had the communication progress of the UN Global Compact, you had the Integrated Reporting Framework, you had something called the SASB framework, you had something called the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. So there were a lot of disclosure frameworks coming up. But the disclosure frameworks were not saying, were asking companies to provide this information in the public domain. But we're not saying what the companies need to do themselves in order to be able to do this well. So those sustainability frameworks behind that were not existent. The other thing was that a lot of these frameworks were built in the West. So they were very contextual to, although they were concerned to be global, they were very contextual to a different context, to a different sort of circumstance. So for example, if you look at the social dimensions, there was very little. There continues to be very little in a lot of these frameworks. So beyond diversity from a gender and race perspective, there is very lot of stock exchanges across the world started asking listed companies to report. Again, just a reporting framework, not saying what should be behind that. So this was the context in which, when the Ministry of Corporate Affairs started thinking about it, said we need to look at one which is more India and Indian specific. Because what was happening was that there were a plethora of these all coming from the West. India was not, Indian companies or the government or whatever was not part sitting on that table while these were being discussed. So it was in a sense, something that had been thrown at us. And to be fair to the West, it is not that we were not invited, we were just not going. We were just not participating in these discussions around which these frameworks were being built. So in many ways they were out of context to India. And that's why the ministry said, let's try and do something that is built in the Indian context. That is then less confusing because a company is asking, should I follow ISO 26000? Should I follow Global Compact? Should I follow GRI? So there's a lot of confusion. So he said, let's try and create one Indian one. And then let's attach to it a disclosure framework so that the whole thing becomes integrated in itself. And that was the birth of the National Voluntary Guidelines in 2011, again released by the ministry. And then updated in 2019 because between 2011 and 2019, lots of things that happened in the global space. You had the Sustainable Development Goals, you had the UN Guiding Principles of Business and Human Rights, you had India's Companies Act of 2013, you had work on child labor and legal, tightening of the legal framework on child labor. So we had lots of things happening. So that 2011 National Voluntary Guidelines was sort of a little outdated. So it needed to be brought up. You had the Paris Agreement with climate change. So all the things where India was a signatory and therefore had commitments to deliver. And if India were to deliver, it cannot happen without corporate India delivering. So it needed that sort of a harmonization, if you like, to happen. And that gave birth to this. So when the NGRBC was being put together, and I happened to be one of those who was asked to be part of the committee that was putting this together, we sort of kept in mind a few thoughts that should go into its making. So we said yes, it needs to be Indian, but it also needs to have an alignment with the global. You cannot just have a pure Indian one with no connectivity with the global. And that we felt was important. Not just because we were not going to be nationalist about it, nobody was going to be nationalist about it. It was just a simple understanding that there is a lot in Western frameworks that is important for us to learn and to harmonize and to pick up. So that was very much there that we need to align ourselves, and that builds credibility. So we said we will do that. The second is that there was a big discussion on should these become mandatory, should these guidelines actually become a form of a mandate. And I think within the Ministry of Corporate Affairs there was a lot of discussion on it. And there was a general consensus that mandating something like this will become very difficult. You have to take it to a level of a standard which is actually quite rigorous. So you can't mandate behavior, you can't mandate conduct. What you can mandate is disclosures. So it was said, let the guidelines be voluntary, let's have a disclosure framework and let's try and make that mandate. So the idea therefore being that the company has to then tell the world, tell the outside world, what it is doing on various of these principles that the national guidelines constitute. So voluntary frameworks of guidelines, but mandated disclosures were another design principle. And obviously related to that was there needed to be a disclosure framework attached to the GRS. And that's what is now called the BRSR, which the SEBI has mandated for the top 1,000 listed companies for the business responsibility and sustainability report. From this year onward, you will see the top 1,000 listed companies and reporting on this. So that was the basis of the NGRBC. And so there was a committee that was formed in the MCA that put together the BRSR outline in detail. Both the NGRBC and the BRSR was open to a lot of public scrutiny in the sense it was put into the public domain for comments. In 5 cities, discussions were held by the MCA and its think tank, which is called the Indian Institute of Corporate Affairs, to actually bring in inputs from business, from civil society, NGOs, and from academia. So all of these were engaged in this process, and I think there were, as I said, 5 consultations in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, and online. And I think we received over 1,100 kind of comments, and then painstakingly went through each one, decided which one we could adopt, which one we could, and so on. And then when the BRSR was put together by the committee, SEBI went through a similar process. They again went in for public comment, and of course they got a lot of comments both from companies and from civil society, and then finalized the BRSR. So the BRSR that you see currently in the SEBI website is slightly different from the one that the committee had, the NCS committee had recommended. And I think that is inevitable, because one of the things that we constantly got was pushback from companies saying reporting burden is very high, you're asking us to give so much of information and so on and so forth. But the MCA was very clear that you got to do this because as a company you're using public resources, you're using environment, which is a public good, you can't misuse it and not be accountable. You use social resources, so you can't, you have to be accountable to that. So therefore, that mandate came about. So what is the NTRPC? So the NTRPC basically has 9 principles. And you could broadly categorize them into E, S, and G, because that seems to be the flavor of the month. So you can describe them, and although in the committee we were a little reluctant because it's very hard to draw a line and say this is an environmental principle and this is a social principle. But just for the sake of convenience, it is possible. So what were there are 9 principles, as I said. So there are 3 of them which you could call within the governance realm. So principle number 1 talks about, basically about governance, but talks about ethics, transparency and accountability. And puts the onus very squarely on the board of the company. It says the board of the company has to be responsible for various stuff. See, the NTRPC structure, there are 3 parts to it for each principle. So each principle has a headline. It just says what that principle is about. Second, it has what is called a description, which describes what that principle means. And the third is it's called core elements, which is what should a company do, what actions should a company take to be aligned with that principle. So we try to be as practical as it could. It's not just a sort of a well-meaning, high-level document. It is somewhat actionable. That companies can actually pick up what is there in action. So first, the governance principle 1 was around ethics and transparency and accountability, and said what companies must do to be thus. Then there was a principle on being respecting and being responsive to stakeholders. Again, it was left to the governance body, which is the board, to say you need to know who your stakeholders are. You need to, within that, identify who are the most marginalized amongst those stakeholders, and you need to address and you need to ensure that the needs of those are understood and addressed in some manner, being the way to act and behave. The third element in the governance piece was what is called responsible public policy advocacy. Now, this was a tricky principle because it was obviously born out of the fact that businesses are so powerful that it is questionable on whether who makes policy, government or business, especially when it comes to a lot of policies related to business. And because of that power, we felt that you need to find ways to ensure that that business uses that power responsibly when it's making any public advocacy. We said, okay, fine. In a democracy, you have a right to advocate for changes in laws and processes, and you will obviously do it in your favor. Everybody does it. But the way you do it has to be seen, and it cannot be in conflict with any of the other principles in the national guidelines. So that was the third, let's say, governance principle that the NDRBC talks about. Then it has about four what we call social principles. One is around what happens to employees. And here we talked about not just employees of the business, but also employees in the value chain, in the whole supply chain and the distribution channel. So what happens to employees, well-being of employees, rights of employees, basic things like collective bargaining, the ability to safe working conditions, grievance redressal. So all of these things were there. And the idea was that companies need to actually tick these boxes and say, do they have this in there? If they don't have any of this, can they consider themselves to be a responsible business? The second within the social was respecting and promoting human rights. Now, in the UN Guiding Principle for Business and Human Rights, the requirement of companies is to respect human rights. And so that is something that has been written into this particular principle in terms of what companies must do to demonstrate that they are respecting and promoting human rights both within their system, also within the value chain and the supply chain. The third principle within the social realm was inclusive growth and equitable development. And that's called Principle 8. In fact, Principle 8 in the earlier version of the MPGs is what found its way into Section 135 of the Companies Act, which we call the CSR clause. And what we tried to do was to build on that in this 2019 version of the NDRBC and make it a little bit more robust. The fourth social principle is providing value to customers, which means keeping them safe so that the products are safe, respecting the rights to privacy, and so on and so forth, and a whole bunch of stuff like that. So these were the four social principles. And there were two environmental principles. One was about sustainable and safe processes, and the other was on respecting and protecting and renewing the environment. So these 9 principles taken together, they were not divisible, they were indivisible and integrated, form the basis on which companies need to conduct themselves. When we try to, as I said, bring in an Indian context to a lot of this. So how did we try and do that? In all the principles, we talked about the emphasis on stakeholders who are marginalized in different ways. And in fact, there's a definition, and we try to define it in terms of saying that exclusion, marginalization takes different forms. Gender is certainly one of them, caste is another one, disability is a third, the kind of professions you have is a fourth. So we try to define it in a glossary as to what it meant to be disadvantaged. And this needed to be sort of rooted in our context, because only an Indian one can talk about what it means to be marginalized in an Indian context. So that was sort of outlined. And so when we talked about non-discrimination, both at the time of employment and at the time of promotions and at the time of separation, discrimination on these dimensions, or non-discrimination on these dimensions was important. So that was well defined. Similarly, when it came to working with communities, again there was an emphasis on saying who are the marginalized, identify them and direct your work of CSR towards those marginalized groups. Similarly in human rights and so on. The other thing that was when we brought in, we thought was an important emphasis, was on the supply chains. Now, this is the weak underbelly for corporate India. It's a weak underbelly for corporations all over the world, particularly in India. And when you're part of if you're a global company with supply chains in a country like China and India, you're so far away from it, there's only so much you can do. But if you're an Indian company with its suppliers sitting in India, you need to actually understand this better and you need to engage with them better. So there was a lot of work that we did in underlining some of the work that some of the emphasis that companies need to put on this sector. A very peculiar form of a supply chain in India is contracted casual labor. You know, you normally think of supply chains as producing goods, but India has so many suppliers of services, and they are the ones who are most marginalized. So, how do you deal with contract and casual labor? How do you deal with contractors? So, these are all parts of things that the NGRBC try to outline and try to focus in their companies. These are the kinds of things you need to look at and focus on. And similarly, we talked about human rights from not just within the company, which was actually in many cases not that significant, but certainly in the value chain. Because that's where a lot of the human rights violations happen. That's where the informal sector is. That's where migrant labor are, and so on and so forth. So all of these dimensions were sort of brought up. And of course, the community engagement piece. So in most frameworks that you see, this CSR element is not a very strong element in these frameworks. But in the Indian context, we felt this is critical. That you cannot, a corporate India has no business to exist without contributing to a larger development paradigm. And so therefore, that became a very important principle in this whole thing. And we were of course very happy when it became the clause 135. It has its own pros and cons, making CSR mandatory. In fact, it's an interesting debate, and I often have differences with my friends in the NGO world who think it's not quite going the way it should be, but that's a different story. So that's really the NGRBC journey, and the kinds of design stuff that we try to put in to make it contextual to an Indian context. The business responsibility and sustainability report, therefore, is an important step in understanding what companies are doing. Are they walking the talk? And I think the challenge there for all of us, including all of us sitting in the room, is the easy part is to get a company to disclose. When I say easy, now that SEBI is on board, it is easy. It's just then right to circular saying you have to report. The hard part is what do you do with what comes out of those reports. And this is often a discussion I have with my friends in civil society, saying that you guys complain about companies. How many of you look at the BRSR report? How many of you analyze them? How many of you critique them? How many of you challenge them? How many of you use information of a company with communities around that company who are impacted and use this to have a discussion with companies and get asked them to become better? And I think that's the challenge that all of us have. Whether you're a civil society actor, whether you're an academic, you have now information. It may be imperfect, but can we use that information? Can we analyze that information and force this virtuous cycle to get so that companies get better at it? So that was the sort of challenge for all of us, and that's the journey of the NGRBC and the BRSR. So long way left, lots of imperfections, but I think at least the pathway is clear. There seems to be some intent from the government of India. I also noticed that we all know that intuitively. We think that institutions are independent of people. They are not. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs, all of this happened because there was a joint secretary and the secretary there who made it happen. The joint secretary is no longer there, the secretary is no longer there, we don't get an appointment with the secretary. So it's the same MC, different people, different way of looking at things. But it's out there, they own the NGRBC, SEBI owns the BRSR, so from there you can only make it better. And I hope you can all be part of that journey. So I'll stop there and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Shankar. So that was a little bit, away from what we were actually discussing all day. And also the practitioner perspective into sustainability. So that way I think it was very distinct and informative for at least to me. Thank you so much, and thank you for agreeing to come and deliver this session at the last minute. And I think I request Shweta. So this is one. We're going to be back at MBC, and the dinner will start somewhere around 7. Okay, instead of 6:30, 6:30 will be too early. 7, dinner is there. Then you rest for the day. Think what was done today and get ready for tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I'm Akhil. So in the class we have a doctoral course on sustainability, and in the class we have this discussion that CSR in itself is conceptualized differently in the West as in India, where in the West it also considered as a competitive strategy where you get a competitive advantage, and where in India the idea of CSR is like the whole conceptualization is in terms of contributing society in terms of 2%, right? So in the discussion, there was this argument like when legally we go CSR through a 2% criteria, it actually, like there are possibility that it actually set a bar and it actually reduces the practices in terms of the companies that are contributing to it. So because we come from that area, like what is your take on this? Like, is it really like that? Like, there is a bar that comes with a 2% criteria, or like the companies by virtue take the stand to invest more in the CSR?
Okay. So what I was talking about was not CSR. CSR is just one component. So the way I look at this is sustainability is about how you make your profits. CSR is what you do with your profits. So to my mind, if you make your profits in a responsible way, you don't really need to do CSR. Right? And to me, CSR is more like you sinned and so you're now atoning for those things. So that's my basic take on CSR. But on the point of this 2% thing, it is debatable. The data, what I have seen, and it's somewhat dated, doesn't show that the spending has gone down or that it's been a gap. So that is not what I have seen, but the data is dated. So it will be helpful to look at the data. Otherwise, it becomes, it's more like an opinion than fact. At least a few years ago, the data was certainly showing that the top 100 listed companies, their CSR spend was well above percent. But to my mind, you see the interesting thing is that those who were already doing CSR before it became mandated, what is happening to them vis-a-vis those who were not? To my mind, that's the difference. Because while I'm not a great proponent, as you can see, about CSR, I think it's certainly that clause has some advantages. One is it forced those who are not doing anything to do something. Second, it made CSR a board-level discussion. We were mandated to have a board committee that about the CSR committee where we needed to have a discussion. And that board committee was reporting to the board. So really, at that level, it became a point of discussion, which to my mind is always good. So like every law's mixed bags, but overall, and I'm not a great fan of mandating CSR. CSR, but it seems to have, to my mind, worked.
So Indian middle class is in general growing and we are somehow following some of the patterns of the Western world in terms of consumers. People here are also becoming more and more aware, consumers are becoming more and more aware about green products, sustainable products, and etc. Given that as a background, you and the body and government, safety body and CA in general has created this framework to rate or to give some kind of I would say benchmarking of companies that whether they are doing what in sustainability or not. Now, can that be used as a marketing activity or can that be used as a can that sustainable activity that the companies are doing and the framework scores that they are getting, can that be communicated to the people so that people also take decisions of their purchase with some level of awareness? Because unless you connect this framework with profitability directly, just creating a framework it's like creating a rule, creating a law. As long as you abide by the law, you are okay to do anything. But if you connect this with directly profitability of the company, then they are not only just abiding some lower limits of those laws, but they will be trying to excel as much as possible. Because that will be directly connected with consumer purchase decisions. So my question is that the framework, only creating framework is enough, or do you think which government should actually think about communicating that framework results every year?
So, actually, I would interpret the question slightly differently to the way you framed it. To my mind, a company goes down the sustainability path because there are business reasons why it does it, or there are mandatory reasons why it does it. This is not a mandate. So, if companies are going down the sustainability path, and many of them are, it is because it makes business sense. And when you say business sense, this is something that in my class I've elaborated over. It's about risks and opportunities, and it's about trying to minimize risks or maximize opportunities. So companies in that sense are rational in the way they do this. Now, so they don't do this because of goodness of heart. They do it out of already. Some of them do it out of goodness of heart. Those are the leadership companies who are not necessarily waiting to calculate what's my return on investment. They're saying that this makes sense, we should do it. So I think that question gets answered independent of the framework. Where the framework comes in is it gives you guidance on what does it mean to be responsible. That's really the limited purpose of the guidance. So you can choose the NGRPC as a framework, you can use ISO 26000 as a framework. I mean, it is up to you. There is no rule or law that says you need to use this particular framework or that. You can make up your own framework. The idea of NGRPC was to say, let's have an Indian framework. Let's just create. See, standard is a very complicated word because standard means a lot. This is not anywhere near the standard. Okay, so it is not a standard in the sense that there are independently verifiable ways of looking at whether the action is happened or not, and whether it can be assured, audited, and certified. It is not even aspiring to be there. So I think the question has different connotations. Does sustainability make business sense? Are companies doing it out of that? Yes. Those who are doing it because it makes business sense. Those who are not are either unaware or they believe that it doesn't. Once you cross that hurdle that companies are doing it because it makes business sense, then it comes to, okay, how do I implement it? And that's when the frameworks come in, that's when the frameworks become helpful. But it doesn't matter. You see, the framework doesn't have to be marketed because if if you believe that it gives you a comparative advantage, it will be the products. So that's why labeling of products happens. So it doesn't have to be a company. It is very specific to what it is. If you want to convince your investor that you're doing it, you don't have to market it. Then that's a conversation you have with an investor. So different stakeholders you need to deal with differently. Thank you.
I hope you had a good experience. Huh? So here is the plan. Firstly, we will announce the winners, right? Yeah. So certificates are here. So three of us are here. Myself, Rajiv Kumar, Professor Kalita Chakravarti, and Nishikanta Kumar. You know, the fourth person from the organizing committee, Professor Raman Singh, is not here. But we put our minds together to decide how to select the best papers. And we had some criteria, for example, the papers which we could receive in time, and plus we had also some other ways to decide the quality of whatever people had written. So based on that, we have come with this list of first, second and third. And I hope you understand this is not really a comment on other papers, but more on what we idiosyncratically ended up liking. And we would be mistaken in our belief, but that's how I think most things like these are. People who decide they are given to their own biases and stuff like that. Anyway, so that said, the first paper that we found, the paper that we are taking as the best paper in the entire conference is titled this, Towards an Ending Conceptual Framework of Sustainability, Yagya, I hope I read these concepts right, Yagya, Sahastitva and the Germanic Paradigm. This is by Dr. Harsh Satya, Society for Integrated Development of Himalayas in Missouri. Second author is Dr. Gopal Babu, Ajay Kumar Engineering College in Hyderabad. Then Professor Rajiv Sandel from Temple IIT Hyderabad, and Sri Kaval Gupta, Society for Integrated Development of Himalaya, again Missouri. So these are the four authors, and this paper we found to be the best. The second one is here. Second one is titled Bridging the Past and Present Sustainable Water Management Technologies Through the Lens of Hydro Science in Ancient India. And this was authored by Rohini Das Gupta of Calcutta University. Yeah, sure. In the meantime, I think Dr. Pushkar Dubey is not here. He is not here. I just read out the name of the third best paper. The title is Attaining Sustainability via Srimad Bhagavad Gita, an empirical study of identified variables, self-efficacy, goal performance, and leadership effectiveness, authored by Dr. Pushkar Dubey. He is from Pandit Sundarlal Sharma, Open University in Chennai. So these are the three papers. I don't think these are the three papers. So, okay, there's some monetary ties, and although we talk about non-material stuff a lot, but this is just a small token of our monetary appreciation for the quality of work that we found in these papers. Yes. Okay, so now let's go to the phase of giving certificates to people who are here. She is going to read out the names of let me do it. In case you are here, then please come. Akhil Jain. Vaibhav Sharma. Anita Chaudhary. Saloni Gupta is next. Shrimati. Saurabh Gupta. Not sure. Abhay Kumar Ocha. No, okay. Sonali Singh. Diktiman Banerjee, again not here. Okay, Shivangi Jiwari. Tiwari, sorry. This is with Shivangi. Diktiman is here. Elja Maria Devi. She is not here. Sorry. Pradinsha Iti. Mustafa Pil. Okay. Manoj T. Thomas. Anita Behra. Professor Ocha, your certificate is here. Ikra Fatma. Okay. Who's that? No, let's read out the name. Whether is not clear, then Anish K. Suresh. Anish B. Suresh, sorry. Anish is here. Shobha Krishna, Shubhanam Krishna. Dr. Aparna Nanda, not here. Neetu Radha, she there. Dr. Avantik Singh, Dr. Neeraj Kishore Jmo, Purva Tripathi, not here. Oh, Purva Tripathi. Dev Meena Pius, she's there. Dr. R. Satish. Aditya Day. Dr. Tanushri Barua. Trilochan Das. Akanksha Dravadi. Mitra Somsa. मेरे रवि खन्ना. Rohini Das Gupta as participant now. Dr. Shalini Bhattacharya. Nilanjana Sinha. We are very happy to acknowledge the contribution by these four people who worked, I think, more than at least me, maybe many of us, and made very valuable contribution to the successful or maybe partly successful organization of this seminar. So we want to acknowledge their contribution. First is Krishna Kumar. Next is Priyan Das. Then Priya Gupta. And Ikra Fatima. Here is a short speech. Hopefully it is short. We have spent some quality time in deciding these awards. The best papers were considered based on many parameters, and we have talked about this. Over the last 2 days, we have had the privilege of engaging in really engaging discussions. I told you that I started feeling very diffident when we the conference, because several ideas which came, I really able to get them. I mean, that's my fault. Ideas were very illuminating. We fostered cross-cultural connection and delved deep into the pivotal role of ancient wisdom in modern management and society, which we saw several times in the workshop. The journey we embarked upon with this conference has been nothing short of transformative. We have collectively explored the intersection of ethics, spirituality, leadership, management, environment, and many other areas. Guided by the principles of empathy, integrity, and inclusivity, I hope that we all saw the glimpses of these things in the discussion and the presentations. We have explored how organizations can truly become agents of positive change in a rapidly evolving global world, especially by taking cognizance of and focusing on the traditional human values of the rich cultural heritage that includes emphasis on inclusivity and on many other values. Because we are sitting in MCHV, so those of you who were here yesterday, you have got some glimpse of Professor S.K. Chakravarty's teaching, in which he, in my understanding, repeatedly emphasized upon inclusivity as well as living in harmony with nature. And my understanding is that we saw this idea coming in many papers at which I was privy to hearing. We are reminded of the words of Swami Vivekananda, who said that arise, awake, and stop not until the goal is reached. So from that perspective, I think we have had decent or more than decent deliberations, but many things that we wanted to accomplish through the papers. My understanding is that that will happen once this conference is over. We are teachers, we will go to classes, and we will tell students to follow certain things that we have found useful in this conference. These words of Vivekananda resonate deeply with the thoughts of this conference and the aspirations of my MCHV, or Management Center for Human Values. MCHV aspires to establish the root of modern Indian management in the ancient roots of its civilization. We had courses from this center which basically emphasized upon this idea. Yesterday, I remember the comments of Mr. Pathak, the keynote speaker, who I think at least twice or thrice articulated the idea that, for example, what is positive and what is normative, those teachings of Professor Chakravarty stayed with him and they still guide his thoughts and behaviors. We have come together not only to gain knowledge and insights, but also to galvanize our collective resolve to create a more social management by taking clues from our cultural values. I could see in almost every paper that I was sitting through here, this idea coming. Throughout these enriching days, we have been privileged to hear from luminaries in the field, academics, practitioners, and thought leaders. This was, I think, personally very useful for me because otherwise, we as academicians are often accused, in my understanding, we are accused of speaking to other people like us, listening to other people like us, and then we remain in a very closed loop. But we had practitioners, and I think what they shared could be very useful. Their contributions have ignited new avenues of thought, sparking innovative ideas, and have the potential to reshape the future of business and society. I believe so. The innovative ideas that have, the cross-cultural perspectives and interdisciplinary dialogues that have taken place are a testament to the power of collaboration in advancing human values on a global scale. Let us carry forward whatever enlightenment we have received here in the last 2 days, and let us champion the call of human values in every decision that we make. The insights that we have gained, the connections that we have forged, I hope that we had enough time to also liaise and network with people who we found for the first time here. So the connections that we have forged and the bonds that hopefully we have formed, we hope from the organizing committee side that will continue to inspire and guide you in your future action. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to distinguished speakers, dedicated volunteers, each delegate for making this conference a success. In conclusion, I want to say that valediction is not an end, but a beginning. I want to repeat that the most of the work that we have to do will start from here onwards. The ideals and values that we have explored and embraced here will continue to shine brightly as we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of business and society. Yesterday, many of you talked about SDGs and the kind of challenges that are before us in case we want to meet those goals. My own sense is that if we end up doing even 5% of what we have seen in classrooms or whatever ideas people have presented, that would be quite a big step in the direction of meeting those goals. And unless we do that, I don't think that we will have 10 years, 15 years from now, this kind of space available for a meeting. We all know the crisis that we are in, and we need to focus and start doing something about it. From the organizing committee side, I hope that we have been able to do something in that direction, and you have felt some energy to go back and take this idea forward in your own individual and collective ways. So thanks again from our behalf. I also thank the support staff and MCHV staff who I think made this room and venue ready in a record time. We in IIMC often kind of say that we are well-meaning but tardy people, so some of you might have sensed that in the several aspects of organizing that we did, but I think we must acknowledge the rapid contribution made by support staff here. Sumanta has been shouldering the burden of conference for a couple of months now, 3-4 months, more than that. So big hand to him. I think definitely more than I worked, I think you have worked at least 10 times more. So thank you, and hopefully we will meet again. Parting is necessary, otherwise we won't meet again. So hope to see everyone here sometime in future, and let me also sincerely hope that the deliberations would have been somewhat useful to you, and you would carry forward at least some of the ideas at least. Thank you, and wish you all the best. Happy journey back home.
Please have tea and snacks before going back. Yeah, so one thing that we forgot to mention is we will be inviting some of the papers to be fast-tracked for review in JHV, Journal of Human Values. You must be seeing some copies outside. That is for you, you can take anything that you like, and we will be inviting some papers for the special issue of JHV.